Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I would like to give you guys and gals a preview of some of the points changes from this year's chapter approved. First off, I'd like to thank Games Workshop for sending me out a review copy of this book so I can give you guys and gals my competitive focused opinion on all of the points changes. I'm not going to cover all of the points changes, but I will go over a lot. And for some armies, I might just give a blanket statement like everything went down in points, if I feel like there are too many points changes to mention. I will also give some brief thoughts on each army and where I think they might fit into the meta with these changes. So I know a lot of you have been waiting a long time for these changes, so let's not waste any more time and let's just jump right into it. So let's start off with the big one that I think everyone is wondering about, especially because of some of the rumors that people have seen online, and that is Space Marines from the Space Marine Codex. So Space Marines have been dominant for the last few months, more dominant than any other army we've seen in 8th edition so far. I believe this is because of a combination of receiving rules on top of rules on top of rules on top of rules. For example, the introduction of doctrines and chapter doctrines, and also the fact that each Space Marine chapter from the Codex now has the most stratagems, relics, and warlord traits available to them when compared to every other army in the game. And the fact that Space Marines are by far the most popular group of sub-factions in the game. So when you have an army that is clearly the strongest in the game, while being a popular army that a lot of people own, that's a recipe for seeing this army everywhere, since everyone and their mother is now dusting off their Marines and playing with them. So with all that said, Space Marines, as far as I can see, didn't receive any points changes. I think that was a given because the Codex and supplements literally just came out a couple of months ago. So if there was going to be any changes, it most likely would have been in the Codex itself when it was released. And I assume Games Workshop wanted to see how Marines did in the meta before making changes. And I also assume that this chapter approved was printed slightly after the initial release of the Space Marine Codex, so there wasn't enough time to make changes based on their performance. This is something I will talk about later on in the video, after I go through all of the points changes and stuff, but yeah, for now, Space Marines didn't receive any changes that I noticed, but I may have missed one or two while going through everything in this book. So before I move on to talking about the other armies, I want to talk about something. I don't think Space Marines not receiving a nerf is some kind of bad thing, even though they have been dominating the last couple of months. My theory for the last few months that I wanted to make a video on, and am probably still going to make a video on, is that I think Games Workshop wants the new Space Marines as the benchmark for where every army in the game should be. So if an army could already stand up to Marines, then they stayed around the same points, while armies that couldn't really compete with Marines went down in points. It's the same thing that happened in last year's chapter approved, but back then it was Imperial Guard, Drukhari, and Craft Worlds being the benchmark armies instead of Marine. So now with that said, let's talk about the other armies. Also, please note that when I say something went up or down a certain amount of points, I'm talking about points per model. So if I say something went down by 2 points, I mean it went down 2 points per model, and I'm just saving time instead of saying per model over and over again. For Adeptus Custodes, they had points drops on a ton of things. Most things went down by 5 or 10 points. Almost everything, to be honest. So what this means is that Custodes armies will be able to fit in an extra unit of something that they couldn't before these changes, and possibly an extra model or two, but probably not a full second unit, since a lot of their stuff is pretty expensive because they're an elite army. So it's not a huge change, but it's definitely a buff. So in my opinion, Custodes were already in a decent spot, not a great one, but a decent one. So these changes should help them out a bit, especially if they get some buffs in an upcoming Psychic Awakening book. For Astra Militarum, or the Imperial Guard, they received a few points drops as well. Not a ton, but a few. A couple of their Lord of War tanks went down in points by a chunk, like the Bane Hammer going down by 50 points, the Doom Hammer going down by 50 points, Astropaths went down by 10 points, Ratlings down by 2 points, and Tempestus Scions went down by a couple of points as well. Wyverns did, however, go up by 10 points, and Mortars also went up by 4 points. Other than those, there isn't really any other changes that I noticed. So those rumors you probably heard online that Guardsmen were going up to 5 points, that actually never happened. So personally, I think these changes were good, since Guard was a top tier faction for a long time in the meta, until Space Marines arrived. The only change that I disagree with is the points increased on Wyverns and Mortars. I don't think that those should have happened, especially with the Space Marine Whirlwind being at a lower points cost than the Wyvern, and the fact that Mortars don't really do all that much damage in the Space Marine meta. When it was still a toughness 3 meta with Guard and Eldar, yeah, Mortars were great, but against power armor Marines, they aren't that great even before the changes. Scions going down in points is nice too, because now you can get a really cheap battalion out of them, so we may see some Scions popping up in Astra Militarum lists in the future. But overall, I don't think this changes much for Astra Militarum, at least in the current meta, unless they get some really good buffs with the Psychic Awakening update. For Blood Angels, their points went down on a bunch of units as well. Death Company went down by 2 points, Sanguinary Guard and their weapons went down in points, all of the Blood Angel Dreadnoughts went down 10 points, Mephiston went down 15 points, Dante went down 25 points, and the Sanguinor went down 20 points. The only thing that went up in points is Thunderhammers for the characters to match the same points values of the Space Marine Codex. So that's really only one nerf, but mainly buffs across the board. So overall, I think these were great changes, especially because some of you may have noticed, the Blood Angel Psychic Awakening book was announced today, and Games Workshop also sent me a review copy of that book, and I've had a look through it. And after looking through it, I can assure you the Blood Angels have definitely received a good buff and will definitely be seeing some play in competitive. I'll talk more about that though when I finish up that video and I release it on my channel. For Dark Angels, Black Knights are down 4 points, Jet Fighters are down 33 points, Dark Talon down 15 points, and Deathwing Knights down 2 points. So not that many changes, but Dark Angels share a lot of the same units as regular Space Marines, like Intercessors and stuff like that, so I think it's fair that all of that stuff remain the same to be the same as the Space Marine Codex. Overall, this is definitely a slight buff to the army, but unless they get some good stuff in Psychic Awakening, I don't really think this is a good enough buff to see those units in competitive play, except for maybe the Jet Fighter. For Space Wolves, pretty much all of their characters went down in points, and Storm Shields dropped to 5 points, and a bunch of their war gear also went down in points too. Wolfen dropped 5 points, Swift Claws went up by 2 points, and I think that's about all of the changes other than the stuff that they share with the Space Marine Codex that now match the points in that codex. So overall, some nice changes, but I think we will need to wait and see what Psychic Awakening does for Space Wolves before I can say for sure that these changes were good enough, since Space Wolves were a good contender for the worst army in the game, alongside Dark Angels and Grey Knights. Speaking of which, for Grey Knights, they got a points reduction across the board. I'm not going to go over all of them because it's basically the entire codex. The big one I like though is that the Nemesis Grandmasters went down a chunk of points. So personally, I can see them being souped up in certain Imperium lists now and actually being a good pick. With all these points changes as well, if they get some good stuff from Psychic Awakening, I think we might actually start seeing some Grey Knights being played in competitive again. So here's to hoping. For Deathwatch, I don't think anything changed at all, but I could have missed something. I think this kind of sucks because Deathwatch hasn't really seen much play at all except for like the beginning of the year, so I assume they would get some sort of love. But maybe they have something great coming in Psychic Awakening, and Games Workshop was preemptive in that, so they didn't buff them here only to super buff them again later, so I guess let's just hope that's the case. For Sisters of Battle, I'm not going to go over these changes because I assume they will all be posted in their new codex once it's released, and I'll go over them when I do a review on that book. For Imperial Knights, the Crusader went up in points to match the Chaos Knight equivalent. Basically everything now matches the Chaos Knights. Also, Helverins went down in points by a nice chunk. So I assume this was because we didn't really see many of them in Knights lists at all. We only ever saw the big Knights. So I could see more Knights lists including Helverins now. As for the Knights now matching the Chaos Knights, I think this is fine since Knights have been one of the more dominant factions in the game for the majority of the year. And the only reason I think we see less Knights now in the meta is because Space Marines exist, and I assume most Knight players switched over to playing Space Marines to enjoy it while it lasts. As for the last of the Imperium stuff, all the Assassins went up by 10 points each. I think this is fair, since we did see a lot of sideboard assassins during 2019, not so much towards the end of the year because they screw over Space Marines from getting their doctrines, but in a lot of other Imperium armies we did see the plug-and-play assassins. And by only going up 10 points, this doesn't really hurt the plug-and-play assassin that much, but it does hurt armies that use multiple assassins or spam assassins, so personally I'm okay with this change. For Tau, Kroot went down 1 point, Crisis Suits went down 3 points, and some of the less seen war gear went down a few points as well. So overall, this is expected in my opinion. Those units were the only ones not really seeing play in competitive, and the ones that were seeing play in competitive remain the same, since again, I feel like Games Workshop's balance philosophy seems to be mainly buffing weak stuff instead of nerfing strong stuff. So overall, I don't think this will have much change on Tau builds, other than we might see some more commanders with fusion blasters again. For Drukhari, Archons went down 15, Incubi down 2, Mandrakes down 1, Hellions down 2, Reavers down 3, Chronos down 5, Ravagers up 15, Razorwings up 15, and Drazar down 20. So overall, I think this is a nerf to Drukhari, not a big one, but a slight one. And as a Drukhari player myself, I can understand it. The cool thing about this though, is that it's only a slight nerf to pure Drukhari armies, but a decent nerf to Eldari soup armies that just bring 3 Ravagers or 3 Razorwings or both to get access to Agents of Ect. So personally, I like how Games Workshop went about doing this. Because in pure Drukhari, you're probably taking 2 or 3 Archons, so you save 45 points there. But with the 3 Ravagers, you're back up 45 points, so it evens out. But then with the Razorwings going up 10 points, you're now up 10 or 30 points depending on how many Razorwings you bring. And personally, I bring 2 in my list, so I'm only up 20 points, which means I have to drop 1 Blaster and 1 Phantasm Grenade Launcher from my list, which I'm perfectly okay with. For Craft Worlds, Dark Reapers went down by 3, the Falcon went down by 10, Fire Dragons down by 2, Shining Spears down by 4, Spirit Seer down by 10, Striking Scorpions down by 2, Wraith Knights down 30, Wraith Lords down 5, Eldrad up 10, Crimson Hunter Exarchs up 15. So overall some buffs to Craft Worlds, and also Inari since they like to use Shining Spears. The Crimson Hunter Exarchs going up 15 points means Craft World Flyer spam went up 45 to 75 points if they also include the Drukhari Razorwings. So a decent nerf. Not a huge nerf, but a decent one. Personally, I think this might lead to a little bit less of flyer spam in the meta, but probably not by a lot. Personally, if I was playing the army, I think I would still stick with it because first off, I'd already have the models and not really need to buy anything else. And second, with the Spirits here going down 10 points, you really only need to drop like 1 unit of Rangers and find 5 points somewhere else to drop for the list to still work. So I think this nerf was fair because especially in the Space Marine meta now, Eldar flyers aren't all what they used to be because Space Marine rerolls just murder the flyers, especially Imperial Fists. For Necrons, Imhotep went down 20 points, Lichguard went down 2 points, Wraiths went down 6 points, and other various units went down in points as well. Overall, I kinda wish Warriors went down a point or two, so we might actually see them in competitive, since personally, I believe them to be the unit everyone thinks of when you think of Necrons, but unfortunately, they're still the same. So when it comes to Necrons in the meta, I think it's still gonna be the same. I think the Doom 6, so the 3 Doom Scythes and the 3 Doomsday Arcs, I think those are still going to be staples because they remain the same in this book. So as for competitive Necron builds, I honestly don't think they changed very much. For Orcs, I'm just going to do a summary. A lot of their stuff that was seeing play constantly stayed the same points, with a few things going up in points. And a few things like Def Koptas that weren't seeing much play went down in points. So the big one I personally wanted to look at was Smash-A-Guns and Grots, since we've been seeing them take over a majority of Orc lists. And well, Grots stayed the same, but Smash-A-Guns only went up by 2 points. So I assume this really doesn't change all that much for current Orc lists, so we can still expect to see 18 Smash-A-Guns in competitive Orc lists. For Tyranids, they received some points drops on units, but not much from what I can see. To be honest, I didn't spend a lot of time on them, so I'm sorry to all you Tyranid players. But they did receive some cool stuff in Psychic Awakening that I think might boost them up a bit, so Tyranid players, look out for that video because it will be out sometime within the next week. For Genestealer cults, I think most of their stuff more or less stayed the same since they were seeing a bunch of play in tournaments in 2019, so I think that's fair. So with that said, I think their builds are pretty much more or less just going to stay the same unless they're trying to counter whatever meta comes out after this chapter approved update. And now let's talk about my beloved Chaos Space Marines who received a massive buff in my opinion from this update. Demon Prince with Wings went down 15 points. Dark Apostles went down 28 points. Sorcerers down I think 8 points. Cultists are down 1 point, Chaos Space Marines down 2 points, Noise Marines down 2 points, Berserkers down 4 points, Possessed down 3 points, Rubrics down 2 points, Cultists down by 1 point, Chaos Land Raider down 60 points, Forge Fiends down 20 points, Mauler Fiends down 10 points, Obliterators down 20 points, Venom Crawlers down 15 points, Helldrakes down 27 points, and Abaddon down 30 points. So holy crap, the Chaos Space Marines got a buff from this book. And on top of the stuff that they received in the Faith and Fury supplement, I think Chaos Space Marines might actually be a top contender in the current meta with builds that aren't 3 Disco Lords and a bunch of Forge World Dreads. I think regular demon engines might actually be pretty decent now, especially Helldrakes, Mauler Fiends, and Forge Fiends. With that said though, Imperial Fists are still a thing, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Also, the Land Raider going down 60 points, holy crap. So overall, for a pure Chaos Space Marines list, you're probably saving something like 150 to 300 points so you can bring that much extra stuff. It's actually kind of nuts, and I'm super excited to play my Chaos Space Marines again. For Death Guard, the stuff that they share with vanilla Chaos Space Marines went down to match their costs, and instead of listing everything, I'll just say that a bunch of points decreases across the board for Death Guard as well. For Thousand Suns, however, they've seen some points increases to stuff like their version of the Demon Prince, and Zangor's going up by 1 point per model. Their Terminators went down by 1 point per model, and Zangor Enlightened went down by 1 point per model. And like Death Guard, the stuff that they share with the vanilla Chaos Space Marines went down to match those points cost as well. So overall, I think these changes were okay. I do kind of agree with the changes to the Demon Prince, because it is clearly better than all the other Demon Princes. It has a 4-up invul and it can cast 2 spells, and out of those 2 spells it has 18 to pick from. But the Zangors going up 1 point pretty much means I don't think we will ever see them on a top table again, unless they get something amazing in Psychic Awakening. This makes me really sad since I have 30 Zangors painted up beautifully by one of the channel's past sponsors, but now they're just gonna collect dust for the time being. I think when Games Workshop came out with the last FAQ and made it so that you couldn't take the Chaos Instrument plus the Brayhorn, I think that was enough to nerf Zangors, but now this extra point per model, I honestly think it kills the Zangors. So with that said, where I think Thousand Suns will fit in the meta, I actually don't think they're going to fit that well anymore. You might see like Armon splashed into a Chaos list every now and then to go with regular Chaos Space Marines or something like that. But with a points change that comes with the Chaos Demons, I think the Gym Vessel list is pretty much dead, to be honest. So speaking of that, for Chaos Demons, all the Greater Demons went down in points, and Plague Bearers went up to 8 points per model. I think this is fair because no one really was ever playing any of the Greater Demons, and now I could see them possibly seeing some play, especially when combined with Chaos Space Marines, spamming stuff like Demon Vehicles for a big elite list. And for Plague Bearers, I kind of agree and disagree on this change, because sure, early on in the year they were doing amazing, but with the way rerolls work now, Plague Bearers aren't what they used to be. But with stuff like Vox Scream being introduced into the game, I think Plague Bearers might be okay again, because you can shut down the enemy's reroll auras. Overall though, I think this is an okay nerf, because if you combine the Plague Bearers with Chaos Space Marines, who got some massive point reductions, it almost isn't really like the nerf happened. For example, in my previous video, I talked about having a Plague Bearer screen to protect Alpha Legion Obliterators who can't be shot at due to a new stratagem from Faith and Fury. Well, Obliterators went down 20 points per model, so you save 60 points on a unit of 3. Plague Bearers went up 1 point per model, so if you bring 2 blobs, which is the standard, then you're up 60 points, so they cancel each other out. And then if the rest of your list is Chaos Space Marine stuff that went down in points, it's still an overall buff to that type of list in my opinion. So again, I kind of think this was needed, otherwise that type of list might have actually been a little overboard in my opinion. And that's going to be it for all the points changes that I wanted to talk about. Overall, I think Chaos Space Marines, and really Chaos in general, are the biggest winners of this chapter approved, with probably Grey Knights coming in a close second. I think we won't know what the meta truly is going to be like though, until probably the Las Vegas Open, which is coming up soonish, because that is the biggest tournament in the world by far, so I'm anxiously looking forward to watching that stream and looking up those results when the event takes place. And now, before I end this video, I want to give some thoughts on Chapter Approved and acknowledge the elephant in the room. Personally, I don't think Chapter Approved should be what it currently is, which to me is a paid DLC for points updates. I personally think Games Workshop should move to a different format and upgrade to 2019. There is no reason to have to print and charge people money for points updates in a physical book, especially when things like Battlescribe exist, where people can just avoid purchasing the book and wait for Battlescribe to update. Anecdotally, out of all of my friends and people that I know who play this game, I am the only person who has ever purchased a Chapter Approved book, and that was only because I wanted to do a video on it for my channel. Everyone else just waited for Battlescribe to update within a week and get the updates from there. To be fair, all of the people that I talk to and that I know that play this game all play ITC format, so it's not like the other stuff in the book is useful to them, so they only really want the points changes, which again, they get by just waiting for Battlescribe to update. So my suggestion is that Games Workshop should instead just post the points changes for free online like they do with FAQs and erratas. That's essentially what these points changes are anyways, they're just an errata, so why not post it online with the rest of the erratas? The main reason I would love for this change to be made, not only because it would save people money, but also because some armies and units go an entire year waiting for the next chapter approved before they can be played again because they kinda got left in the dust. Think of like Chaos Cultists, for example, who went up to 5 points per model and just suddenly dropped out of everyone's Chaos lists. So what I propose is that my suggestion is to, instead of updating points once a year, how about they update the points every 3 or 4 months and just post them online in the erratas section on their website. This way we can keep the meta much healthier and fresh at a quicker rate. And people don't have to quit the game for a year waiting for the next chapter approved to help out their army because they were left in the dust, kinda like Grey Knights and Space Wolf players. Also, another benefit to this is because of the way they print things like these in advance, we could actually get points changes to stuff that comes out just before chapter approved if it needs changes, kinda like Space Marines. Again, I think this would be much healthier for the game if they updated points more often and had them for free online. That way armies and units that are in the gutter don't have to wait a year to get updated to get some play. And armies that are dominating won't dominate for as long as they do. Example, see Imperial Knights run during 2019. So if anyone from Games Workshop sees this video, please don't hate me for sharing this opinion. I just want to see the game I love prosper and do well. I honestly think this change would be much better for the game overall, and I assume a good portion of the 40k community would agree with me. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content like this. Also hit that bell icon if you want to be notified when I release new videos. Also feel free to check me out on Patreon if you'd like to help support my channel so that I can continue making videos like this. Thanks to all my current patrons, you guys and gals are awesome, and I honestly can't thank you all enough. And thanks to everyone who watched this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.